Hello and welcome to this video, and in this video I'm going to be ranking my 10 favourite films by the Archers, also known as Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, which were a director and writer duo who made films in Britain through the 1940s, through the war period into the 1950s. Now, on this channel I normally talk about music. I recently did a video on Kate Bush, and I pointed out this sort of how Kate Bush has alluded directly to one Powell and Pressburger film, The Red Shoes, on her album The Red Shoes, and indirectly on Hounds of Love. I thought that there were sort of influences from A Matter of Life and Death. And a number of people asked me to go deeper into these sort of allusions and metaphors used by Kate Bush, which I would love to do. But what's happening here is when we delve into one art form like music, other art forms start to emerge. This is a really interesting thing. It's very difficult to talk about one art form in isolation. I'm a huge music fan, and I'm a huge film fan as well. And my favourite filmmakers are Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger, which I believe in a sort of category all of their own. Very innovative, very ahead of their time, but also very rooted in the English aesthetic. Now, any visitors to this channel will know I've talked about the English aesthetic and how it relates to rock music, and particularly to progressive rock music. And so I've tried to explain how this relates to what I normally do on this channel. I'm not going to do it anymore. Let's just dive in, because I'm sure there's some people who have clicked on this video who are also Powell and Pressburger's fans and just want to know what my top 10 films are. But as we start, I'm not going to try and get into the storylines. I'm just going to tell you how I feel about these films, how they fit in to sort of Powell and Pressburger world, and tell you why I've put them there. So at number 10 I have Contraband. Here it is. So I think this was made around about 1940. It was the second film they made together. So Michael Powell had made what are called quota quickies throughout the 30s. He'd made quite an artistic film actually called Edge of the World as well. Emeric Pressburger was a scriptwriter, and they were brought together to work on a film in 1939 called The Spy in Black. And when you watch that film, there's a certain magic that you can tell these two have got together, and suddenly there's this sort of chemistry going on. And they make a second film which isn't discussed that much. It's not mentioned as a classic. I absolutely love it. I love The Spy in Black. I think it's an absolutely brilliant film. This one is too, and it's perhaps even more action-packed than The Spy in Black. So, Powell and Pressburger could come to the fore making British war films. Now, I would say The Spy in Black and this are two of the earliest British war films in existence. It took a while, for the British film industry to kick in and start making films about the war. This is made in 1940. Now, this is set before Churchill has become Prime Minister, and it's just a cracking story, and this is where Powell and Pressburger start. They are just brilliant filmmakers who have a innovative and interesting way of telling a story, and that's what you get with this one. It's not that well known in the canon, but I absolutely love it, and that's why I put it in number 10, just to give it a bit of credit. So very early Powell and Pressburger then. So what have we got at number 9? Well, at number 9 we have The 49th Parallel. So as I said, they start off by making these war films. This is a war film, and this is, I would say, is the last of the first phase of Powell and Pressburger. I think it's made around about 1943. That's off the top of my head. This one is the beginning of what I call the masterpiece phase. This isn't quite a masterpiece, but it's got certain ideas and illusions in it which I think are very specific to Powell and Pressburger. So what would they be? One is a sort of really deep, not respect, feeling for what I call the English aesthetic, to Englishness and what that represents. There's also a real future-looking aspect to their films, often dealing with young people and how they see the world and how they want to build a future world. That seems to be something that crops up over and over again. Ways of creating new worlds, and then dealing with certain subjects. Each film seems to deal with certain subjects. This film is a propaganda film. It was made to try and, I think, bring America into the war by concentrating on the 49th parallel, which is the line between Canada and America. But it's got the weirdness that I love about Powell and Pressburger, that you really get huge doses of later on. The thing I love about this film is it starts up, the titles come on, and it says, you know, written by Emmerich Pressburger, directed by Michael Powell, music by Ray Vaughan Williams, and starring Laurence Olivier. And you just think, oh my God, this is like the greatest of the greatest. You know, this is something coming together. You know, there's some wonderful weirdness in this, you know, which is why I put it at number 9. Right. So what have I got at number 8? Well, here we have, from around about 1949, 1950, Gone to Earth. Now this, I would say, is the end of the masterpiece period for Powell and Pressburger. This is where I think they're no longer under rank. When they were under rank, they were really given creative control. Here, this is being produced by David O. Selznick, who put his then wife or girlfriend Jennifer Jones in, and he really had a lot of control in the making of this. He actually took it away and recut it into a different film. Luckily, it's been put back together. This, I would say, is a flawed masterpiece. For me, there is something really interesting in the way that Powell and Pressburger deal with the English aesthetic. Which is, I think, is really looking at the sort of liberal ideas that have come out of English and British history. And there's also a deep sort of love of the English countryside and English historic ways. Well, with this film, you get that in just a huge dose. The way they capture the English countryside in this film, the photography, you know, which I think is Jack Cardiff on this, is absolutely incredible. And it also goes deep into the sort of mysteries, you know, the sort of esoteric undercurrents, the mysticism of sort of England and Britain, which of course I think they were aware were about to disappear, and they dealt with that with other films. The story is what we could just say is a sort of standard bodice ripper. It's the actual material they're dealing with is not as heavy as some of their earlier films, and I would say this is their last. This is not a masterpiece, but it marks the sort of last period where they're really having to sort of kowtow to commerciality a little bit. But there's absolutely some incredible bits in this film, and also there's a huge dose of the Powell and Pressburger weirdness in this film as well. Right, so what have we got? We've just done, that was just number 8, so we're now at number 7. So here it is, The Spy in Black, their very first film from 1939 with the incredible Conrad Veidt. Conrad Veidt was such a great, you know, Powell and Pressburger have relationships with certain actors, and Conrad Veidt is one of those actors. Michael Powell also was involved in the direction of Thief of Baghdad, and Conrad Veidt is absolutely incredible in that, and he's incredible in this. He's so charismatic, and it's just a great war story, possibly the first great World War II story that was ever made. It's just so full of suspense and humour, and it's got a great atmosphere to it. When you watch this, you just feel that these two guys have got together and there's magic going on, and they know it, and it's just a wonderful film. So this is the first, you know, and I thought it had to go in there, so that's gone in at a number. What is it, number 7? So what have I got at number 6? Right, we're now into the masterpieces, I would say now. So at number 6 we have Black Narcissus, which I think is from 1948. Anyone who knows my videos knows that I just get on the camera and talk, so I'm not an encyclopedia. It's a later period for, you know, the masterpiece era, which runs from sort of the end of the war throughout the late 40s. This is just an incredible film. What is this dealing with? Well, I think it's really dealing with sex and sort of eroticism. It's also dealing with otherness. It's dealing with, you know, the mysteries and mysticism, which is in this case is apparent in sort of the Indian culture, and how that affects sort of these British nuns, you know. Like I said, I don't want to get too much into the story. The photography is absolutely incredible. The direction is incredible. There's an atmosphere on this that you just you get in normal filmmaking. You know, I really feel that there's a classic period of filmmaking which was studio driven. Hollywood films had a system where the greatness of those films really relied on storytelling. Right, and story was very, very important. I think in more recent films, people have lost the art of telling stories, in a way. And then there's a British way of telling stories, and I would say Powell and Pressburger are the masters of that. And here you see every technique being used in the book, you know, to tell this story. It's probably got the greatest use of lipstick in any film. Now, if you think of films, lipstick gets used a lot. You know, the sort of the red lips gets used a lot. This is probably the greatest example of that. And if you check that scene out, it really shows you the brilliance of Powell and Pressburger and how clever they are of using things like colour in their films. Martin Scorsese is a huge fan of Powell and Pressburger. He once asked Michael Powell to come and watch a screening of Mean Streets, which is full of red, and Michael Powell turned around and says, you know, Martin, you've used a lot of red. And he's turned around and said, yeah, I got it from you, you know. And it's incredible how they could use colour, you know. And this is an absolute masterpiece. Pipped to, which I think is, I'm at number 5 now. Talking of red, The Red Shoes. This is probably the greatest film about creativity, art ever made. Okay, it is obviously the greatest film about dance ever made, I would say. This is where they're at their absolute peak in terms of filmmaking. What's this about, and why do I love it so much? I think there's an idea about creativity and being an artist which is really based upon the story of Cinderella. We could call it the Cinderella theory, that you know, people have this inner beauty and all you need is to come and wave a wand and, you know, for the mechanism to be put in place, and suddenly that artist will shine. And this goes through, like, you know, Pop Idol and X Factor. It's in the story of Robert Johnson selling his soul to the devil. You know, it's this idea of being transformed, and this inner quality suddenly emerges, you know. I think it's a bad idea. I teach music, and I find this idea in my students is not healthy, because it's not like that. You know, creativity, aesthetics, art for the artist is almost like a curse. It's something that should be treated carefully, and it requires a huge amount of work. And in doing that work, it affects your personal life, it affects who you are. That's what this film's about, and it tells that story in an absolutely incredible way. So that's what I've got at number 5, is The Red Shoes, one of the greatest films ever made. From now on, as far as I'm concerned, we have some of the greatest films ever made. At number 4, the incredible Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. All right, this was made in World War II, and it tries to do 2 things which are quite controversial. One of them is look at this Colonel Blimp character, which could almost be seen as a Winston Churchill type character. I think Winston Churchill didn't like this film and he tried to get it banned. But actually it looks at that Colonel Blimp type of figure in a very sympathetic way, and an incredible, innovative way, in that we see him, you know, grow up and grow old, and that is reflected in 3 women, all played by Deborah Carr brilliantly in this film. It also is sympathetic to Germans, and one of the lead characters is a German, and so it really tries to show the humanity of the Germans in this film. There's an incredible scene where the German, played by Anton Walbrook, wants to come into England, Britain, and he's been stopped at sort of customs, and they sit down and interview him. It's one of the greatest acting scenes in history, as far as I'm concerned, and he explains what is great about British culture, or the English aesthetic, as I would call it. And you see that there's a liberal tolerance there that he argues that is not there with the Nazis. It's a really interesting scene. This absolute masterpiece, and the storytelling and the way it jumps back and forth, and the techniques they use to do that is absolutely brilliant. So what have I got at number 3? Right, the forgotten masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. Greater than the Red Shoes, greater than Blimp, you know, greater than Black Narcissus. I Know Where I'm Going. Just one of the most perfect love stories ever told, which really deals with free will and fate and how they work together. And all the philosophers have never been able to really pin down how those two things work together, but Powell and Pressburger do this in this film. You know, how does that work? Are we in control of our destiny, or are we not? And we are just the whims of fate. That's what we get with this film. Absolutely incredible performances, brilliantly told, brilliant shot, all the full-on weirdness, you know, from Powell and Pressburger. So this is what I've got at number 3. I Know Where I'm Going. Not often mentioned with the other classic ones, but I think it's up there. I think Martin Scorsese said it also as well, that this is the forgotten masterpiece. It really is, and this is a absolutely brilliant film, brilliant use of music, and also this idea of the English retreating to Scotland. It's almost like a place, a pilgrimage that people do. There's many films where this happens, where you go to Scotland, there's some sort of transformation that happens, and this is perhaps the greatest film in portraying that. There's incredible weird storytelling things in there. I won't get into it because I don't want to spoil these for people who haven't seen it, but that's at my number 3. So at number 2, I have perhaps their most weirdest film of all, A Canterbury Tale. This was so closely vying for number 1 for me. This is something else, you know. It's based upon the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. It follows, you know, I think 3 young people in the middle of war, trying to get to Canterbury and undergoing some sort of transformation when they go there. And this transformation is all around this sort of mystery, which is a very strange mystery, where they arrive at the village and somebody's going around and plopping glue on the young women in that village in an attempt to stop them socializing with the Americans that are based there. It really deals with the differences and similarities between America and Britain. As a side note, many years ago I went down and followed the trail that Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger had made when they made this film. I made a little film, you know, and eventually I ended up going to Canterbury, where of course I would receive my blessings or penance for going, just like the film. And believe me, it happened as I drove in. I was on a road and someone was mowing the lawn, and a huge rock flew out of the lawnmower, came through my windscreen, cut my arm open, and my film took a turn for the worst or best, I don't know, but it was a very strange experience, that was. Anyway, that's my number 2, A Canterbury Tale. One of the greatest films ever made, and weird. This is like art filmmaking. This is the British making avant-garde film in their own way, which is so less showy-offy than so many other people when they try and make avant-garde films. Right, this is brilliant. So, what have I got at number 1? Of course, you've guessed it. And this is my favourite film ever made, A Matter of Life and Death. You know, made towards the end of the war. It deals with an airman who has been dropped in the sea, and he's either hallucinating or it's real, in that he's in contact with some sort of afterlife. On Earth they discover he's got a brain problem that needs an operation, whereas in the afterlife they say that he should die because he wasn't collected by this collector. It's a very strange story told in an incredible way. And then the film plays out where you've got a sort of court case going on in the afterlife, which seems to mirror the operation that's going on Earth. It really deals with the war. It deals with the future that is going to happen after the war. It deals with American and British relations on the surface, but underneath it really deals with perception and who we are, and how there's this scientific way of thinking how the mind works, and then there's this sort of esoteric artistic way of thinking how the mind works, which is all metaphorical, and how those relate together. So that's my number one. That's my top 10 Powell and Pressburger films. A different thing for you all, but I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next video. Of course, if you like this, please like it, drop your comments in and all that stuff, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much. Bye.